Welcome to Report Crimes. Tonight's the night, and it's going to happen again. Tonight, we begin a journey into the life of a man whose story challenges the line between justice and darkness. A man many call the real-life Dexter, but his story is far more complex, far more tragic, and far more unsettling than fiction. Our story begins in a small town called Santa Rita do Sapucaí, a town filled with poverty, struggle, and hard lives. Pedro Rodrigues Filho was born into a family shaken by conflict. His father was unpredictable, his home unstable, and even before he entered the world, violence had already touched him. Pedro's childhood was shaped not by love and safety, but by fear and confusion. He learned early that the world was not kind, not gentle, and certainly not fair. In school, teachers noticed something unusual. Pedro didn't respond to danger the way other children did. There was no fear, no hesitation, just a deep, cold silence. This wasn't confidence. It was something else entirely, a mind shaped by chaos. When Pedro was 16, an event occurred that pushed him down a path he would never return from. His father was fired from his job, accused of stealing. For Pedro, this accusation was an attack on the little he had left. This moment planted an idea inside him, that sometimes, to correct a wrong, you must take matters into your own hands. It was the very first spark of the vigilante he would later become. This was the moment Pedro created his personal code, a code he would follow for the rest of his life. Only target those who harm others. Never touch the innocent. Never run from consequences. Deliver justice in your own way. He believed the law was broken. He believed society allowed criminals to walk free, and Pedro could not accept that. To him, this wasn't a choice. It was a responsibility. Pedro became a shadow, a ghost moving through the criminal world. He believed that fear could keep neighborhoods safe, and Pedro became the source of that fear. He was not a hero. He was not a villain. He was something in between. Pedro's life was about to take an even darker turn. He would fall in love and lose everything, and that moment would turn him into one of the most feared men inside Brazil's deadliest prisons. Just when Pedro's life seemed condemned to darkness, someone entered his world who changed everything. For the first time, Pedro experienced tenderness, something he had never known. But sometimes life is cruel to those who find peace too late. Maria was caught in a violent dispute in their neighborhood, and her life ended in a moment Pedro could never forget. With Maria's death, the last piece of humanity inside him disappeared. He returned to his old world, but this time he no longer cared about rules, limits, or consequences. For Pedro, the idea of justice became personal. He was no longer fighting crime, he was fighting his own pain. After years of evading the law, the hunt for Pedro intensified. He surrendered calmly, as if he knew this moment was inevitable. Prison did not scare Pedro. If anything, he saw it as a new battlefield. Inmates whispered his name. Guards watched him carefully, and Pedro followed his code, even behind bars. He targeted individuals he believed had harmed others, and inside prison, that list was long. Pedro became something rare, a man both feared and strangely respected. After his release, he spoke openly about his past. He told young people not to follow his path. He seemed calm, reflective, almost philosophical. He said, "I made choices, but I wouldn't want anyone to repeat my life." Whether he meant it or not, only he truly knows. On March 5th, 2023, Pedro's past finally returned. Unknown individuals ended his life. Revenge, justice, or something else. We may never know. Pedro Rodrigues Filho was not a hero, not a simple villain. He was a product of a broken world and a symbol of what happens when justice collapses. His story is a warning. Violence creates more violence. Darkness creates more darkness. And sometimes monsters are born, not made. But to truly understand his place in history, we must go deeper into the psychology, the society, and the broken system that created him. Experts who studied Pedro's case found something surprising. His emotional responses were not typical. He showed extremely low levels of fear and unusually high responses during stressful moments. This meant he did not respond to danger with panic. He responded with calmness. To mental health specialists, this indicated emotional disconnection, early childhood trauma, possible antisocial patterns, and a damaged sense of empathy. Pedro wasn't born evil. He was born into a world that reshaped his mind before he could even speak. To understand Pedro's rise, we must understand the world around him. In the 60s and 70s, Brazil was facing high crime rates, unstable police forces, corruption, and neighborhoods left defenseless. In some communities, people felt unprotected. When law and justice fail, people look for heroes or anti-heroes. And in that environment, Pedro became a myth, a figure of fear, and for some, a symbol of protection. Even though Pedro's actions were extreme, some citizens saw him as someone who did what the system could not. In the minds of many, Pedro was a man who punished those who harmed innocent people. And in a society desperate for safety, this created a strange form of admiration. Even after his release, his online presence gathered thousands of followers. People were fascinated by him, not because they approved of violence, but because they believed he embodied a distorted form of justice. When the world discovered his story, comparisons began immediately. Dexter, the fictional vigilante from television, killed by a strict moral code. Pedro lived by one. They both targeted violent criminals, had a childhood of trauma, operated by rules, and had double lives. But the difference is crucial. Dexter is fiction. Pedro was real. And reality is far darker than television. Inside prison, Pedro became a legend. He didn't need power. He didn't need weapons. His reputation alone shaped the environment. To prison officials, he was a risk. To inmates, he was a warning. In his final years, Pedro did something unexpected. He tried to teach. He reflected on his life, warning younger generations not to follow his path, saying, "Violence doesn't solve anything. Learn from my mistakes." When Pedro was killed in 2023, his story did not end. It evolved. His life became a mirror, showing what happens when society fails, when justice collapses, and when a child shaped by trauma grows without guidance. So was Pedro really the real-life Dexter? Yes and no. He followed a code. He targeted criminals. He believed he was doing good. But unlike Dexter, Pedro was not a hero. He was a symptom of violence, of neglect, of a world that failed to protect the innocent. His life is not entertainment. It is a warning. If you've watched till the end, thank you. This series took a deep look into one of the most complex true crime stories ever told. If you want more real stories, stories that challenge your mind, stories darker than fiction, make sure to subscribe, because our next case will take you even deeper into the shadows. Stay safe, stay curious, stay in the light.